Hello and welcome to Real Parenting for the Sensitive Mom, the podcast for moms who feel everything and still show up. I'm Adrienne Bishop, your co-host and parenting coach.
And I'm Leah and Adrienne, your co-host and family therapist. In today's episode, Adrienne and I are talking about the mental load that we experience every day and how our hormones and life changes are contributing to our burnout and lack of desire to continue caretaking in the same way.
With our changing culture in the last 20 years, the expectation that women and moms solely hold the mental load of the family has been more widely accepted as unrealistic. The discussion around burnout in moms now includes education about the need for men, dads, partners to share in responsibility in sharing the mental load of the family.
Research has stated that biologically, most women are wired to notice emotional cues and create social connection, and most men are typically wired to be task-focused and hold the existential load, which reduces their natural attunement to emotional and social cues. However, boys can be taught to caretake and notice what needs to be done, and so we will also talk about how to raise boys that are more attuned to the home and the emotional well-being of family members.
So I want to caveat this episode and just say we are going to focus on heterosexual relationships since that seems to be the one that Leah and I are most familiar. So just wanted to make sure everyone knew that we were going to focus on the gender differences between women and men in partnerships. So what is mental load, Leah? Do you want to talk about what that actually means?
Sure, especially since I talk about this, which pretty much every woman I work with, as long as she is a mom, and the mental load being very invisible to anyone else because it is everything that goes on in a woman's brain. No one knows that we're doing it, but it's all the remembering of tasks, the remembering of dates, and especially I think what most people don't always think about, it's the anticipating. What will happen? How do I need to plan for this? And it's going to increase our anxiety because we go through all the what ifs. What if this happens? What if this happens? Because we're constantly tracking the kids' schedule, trying to figure out what's going on with our partners' lives, with our lives, work. And we're just trying to manage it all and it being invisible because we do most of it in our heads. And we're not verbalizing what is going on, and we're maybe not even verbalizing the assistance or help that we need. And then when they're coming to me, they're already feeling burned out. They can't handle it anymore. And this is especially heavy and intense for highly sensitive and empathic moms who are constantly in tune of what's going on for themselves and everyone and everything around them.
Yeah, I also wanted to add the emotional labor, which you did just touch on a little bit, but I think with highly sensitive and empathic moms, you're going to end up having way more attunement to everyone's stress levels, everyone's, being in a mood. It affects you so much more deeply. And so you're carrying that also. And you're right, it is very much in your mind. You're not conscious of it a lot of times. And so we're definitely going to talk a little bit about how that can be managed a little bit better, because once we're aware that we're holding everyone's emotional situation and emotional regulation and we're managing it all the time, we can kind of shift away from doing that just a little bit so that it feels more manageable. And also the idea that because women typically hold the mental load and the emotional load, we become the default parent, because we're so much more in tune, especially as highly sensitive people, to what the kid needs and what the kid is feeling and how we can work with them. And so I think that also becomes really stressful to have that be your job as the main parent.
And the biological piece to that, but also the cultural piece that biologically when we're born, we may be more in tune, but society reinforces that as we get older and what is expected of a girl versus a boy, thinking about the typical gender identities here, and we become the default because for centuries and decades now, men were the ones going off to work and we were caretaking. It was magnified in like the 50s and 60s, and then as women started to go into work, we were still the default parent, but we're taking on more responsibility. Culture is continuing to reinforce that, but as social media has blown up, that we are now able to see what everyone's doing and talk and find support and hear other people say, you don't have to do that anymore. You can have different expectations of your partner. You don't need to do all this until you're burnout. But what I see is women coming to me, how do I do that, right? It's all these habits that we grow into. Our partners have these habits and cultures telling them, no, you're fine, where we feel like we're drowning and we feel like we'll talk about failing and we're not being a good enough mother, good enough partner, good enough woman, really, if we're not able to continue to manage all the load that we're carrying.
Yeah, I feel like with the burnout, especially being more out there as a thing, and the idea that the mental load is carried by moms and it's just the education is out there is like, this is real. It again, we're naming it, we're giving it a label. And again, we did talk about labels being good and bad, but in this sense, this can take away a lot of shame also when it comes to feeling like you're burnt out. There's something wrong with me. Why can't I handle all of this? Well, guess what? Like, this is not uncommon. This is a very common situation. And as a culture, I think we're trying to figure out how to balance it. How do we work through this so that moms aren't doing everything or feeling like they have to do everything, plus working, plus having responsibilities in other areas? How can we make it so that the next generation maybe has a little more of a chance to share and more co-create in this family and make it more of a shared mental load? And we did mention the biological side of caretaking tends to be that women are more attuned for caregiving because of their oxytocin, because of the estrogen, right? So in that sense, typically most moms are going to just naturally go to that place. And then what happens is when some of us hit this perimenopause phase, which we talked a little more in the last episode about how perimenopause affects parenting, your estrogen just decreases. And so does the oxytocin, which is your reward system for caretaking, just pretty much disappears. So estrogen also helps you with working memory, helps you with focus and multitasking and emotional regulation. So you're losing your ability to remember things. You're losing your ability to multitask. You're losing your ability to stay calm, right? And patient. And then on top of it, there is no support there all of a sudden. You're realizing that the systems you've put in place in your house might have depended so much on you that now that things have shifted and your desire and your ability to caretake in the same way has gone way down, there's not anyone really to support you in the way that you might need. And that might be possibly because it's just a habit. Like everybody gets into these systems and processes that they just do and it's easier. I'm just going to do it all myself because it's easier. That's totally normal. But then I think at some point, a lot of us either hit burnout, hit perimenopause, or both. And then we're like, this is not working and it's not sustainable, but I don't have support like I could use it at this moment. So that becomes really, really, really challenging. And so the problem then also becomes, though, the culture does not change. Like the cultural feedback we're getting from the world is the same in our perimenopause phase as before. So no one's like, hey, guess what? It's okay that you don't want to do this anymore. It's normal. It makes sense. And you need support. Instead, they're like, you're still the mom. You still have kids at home. You still need to take care of them. Like, what is wrong? You have failed. So the culture hasn't quite caught up to some of these biological shifts that happen in women, and the support systems have not been built. So I think that's kind of what Leah and I wanted to talk about today, was this idea of like, what's happening with us? Why is it happening? And how do we get that support that we might need? Not only just supporting, but actually sharing and making it easier for it to be not even our job to have to figure this out all the time, but make it more of a cultural, accepting way of being for the partners together to work together in that area.
Along with the hormones when they're dropping real quick, it's really understanding that when we want to talk about taking out the shame, we really want to talk about how we're not failing anymore as a parent, as a mom, because you might feel like you're losing your mind. I have said it multiple times in the last couple of months. I feel like I'm losing my mind because the estrogen is now gone. I cannot remember things. Things are being dropped. And I used to be able to handle it semi well, but now it's almost all gone, along with the estrogen and the memory and the brain fog, because the estrogen's declining. Once the progesterone goes all over the place, you can't regulate your nervous system as well. So you're going to feel burnout more often, and you're not going to be sleeping as well, which is going to exacerbate all of this. So when we're talking about our support system, it's who can provide this care for us when we need it. And I talk with women at this point in their lives all the time where they want to say, I'm done caretaking. I don't want to do it anymore. They do love their family very, very much, but they don't want to be in that caretaking role as intensely as it was. They want to shift. They want to put more of the caretaking role onto them about themselves
Right.
so they can put themselves on top of the priority list. They also want to be cared for. I have
Mm-hmm.
so many women that are like, I just want someone to take care of me,
Yeah.
because throughout their lives, they have been extremely independent. They have always taken care of themselves and their family. And now, when things shift and they can't, they just want someone to step in and be like, I got this. Sit down. Here's something to read. Here's something to binge watch on TV. I got this. And they want to be cared for without needing to write the list, without telling their partner or anybody else what needs to be done. They just want to take that out of their brain.
Yeah. And you were saying before we started, it was this idea that if you forgot something that we needed to do, or maybe you forgot something for a meal, or you forgot something that was happening on the calendar,
Yeah.
if the partner just notices that and just fills in whatever you
Yes.
forgot, like that's what we need at this point, is for
Yes.
somebody to notice some of the things that are being dropped and to just jump in
Mm-hmm.
and do it. And so I feel like
Yeah.
that is super, super important. That's a really good topic that I really want to get into. However, I do want to talk about, if you're not quite in perimenopause, the idea that you might have a mental load that's too heavy is still real. So it's not necessarily that once you get into perimenopause, that's the only time you can have heavy mental load, or you can have burnout. You can have burnout at any stage. And so one of the signs, a couple of the signs I want to talk about with maybe that goes into burnout would be if you have constant irritability, overwhelm, you feel invisible or unappreciated, you feel that mom rage, which we talked about a couple episodes ago, over a small thing, can't make decisions. You're just so tired. Decision fatigue is such a big one. You want to be alone. And also you fantasize about disappearing. And this one is so hysterical, because I remember listening to a podcast like a long time ago with a parenting coach who said, have you ever had a hospital fantasy? And that's basically what this is, where it's like, you don't want to have something really bad, just something mild that puts you in the hospital for about 5 days, where you can just lay on a bed, have somebody feed you food, and watch TV for 5 days straight. If you have a hospital fantasy, you are probably in burnout, right? So it's so common, I know. So it's not really about like being sick or dying. It's more about, I want to be taken care of. That's what I feel like it's about. So just thinking about how that might look for you, or maybe we can help you not get there through some of the things we're going to talk about now, talking about what does help with the mental load. So Leah was talking about not just making a list for your partner, but maybe even having them share the thinking, the planning, the anticipating. Can they maybe think a little bit about what might happen if the kid doesn't make the softball team, and how to handle that maybe before it happens, right? Or like how maybe we can talk to them about it before that does occur, or just kind of take on some of that emotional anticipation, or even anticipation about an organizing or planning. So I was talking about earlier how in perimenopause, I've been forgetting a lot of things. I haven't been able to hold as much in regards to doing things. And so my husband is pretty good at already contributing to the household. He's very good at cooking, cleaning, taking care of the kids. He's so on top of that stuff. But he's noticed that I haven't had the capacity, and we've talked about it. And so he's been stepping up, kind of slowly doing these different things. And so one day, I was out, I think, taking the kid to some activity, and I come home and he has listed out every week of the summer and some ideas as to like what each week could be, and when we need to, plan for summer camps, when we need to plan for vacation, where the vacations could be, how much they would cost, how much money would be for the summer camp. He had planned everything out. I didn't ask him to do that. I didn't even bring it up. And it's one of those things where it's like, we are in the habit probably of making sure that you need to tell the person what to do, or the other person. But in reality, we need to kind of keep training them to, that sounds terrible, but to not have to be reliant on us to tell them how to do it, or what to do, or how to start it, the initiating, right? How to think about it. And so I think that if you're in your early phases of parenting, especially, work on that, work on talking about how it's not just the things that you're doing, it's the mental, the thinking, the emotional piece that really creates burnout, and making sure that you're actually maybe saying, hey, I'm dropping this. Like, I can't remember these things. Can you possibly take notice and just take over. Like if my husband asks me when something is, I say, can you please look at the calendar? And I'm trying to get him to just look at the calendar every single time. And he's starting to do that a lot more. And sometimes not everything's there. I'm fine answering a question if nothing's there, but not all the details are there. But it's like just kind of getting them to, instead of relying on you to start something or to give them all the information, try to back off a little bit and ask them to find it themselves or to initiate it themselves. And eventually, hopefully, that won't be so much of a responsibility on the one person in the relationship and it would be shared. But
right.
I do think there is a little bit of enabling sometimes we were talking about, which is totally understandable and normal because it's just easier to do it. If you have the capacity, you just do it.
Right. Right. But I like what you said, it's sharing the thinking, it's sharing the planning. And with my clients, I'm usually, especially in the early stages of parenting together, it's trying to find at least 10 minutes each week to kind of check in with each other, but also talk about the things that need to be planned, the diapers that need to be bought, and everything that goes into parenting. So you start those patterns, at least within parenting, early.
Love it.
Right? Having those check-ins. So you're sharing the planning, you're sharing the meal prep, you're sharing all the what are we doing this weekend? You're checking in with each other. So it's not on the woman, right? So the partner can say, well, I'm thinking about this. Okay, so how do we make this work, right? And that's when we can, compromise and negotiate, but it's together. So you feel like
Yes.
you have a partner,
Yeah.
right? A teammate. Many of the women I talk to, they're like, I want a teammate. I can't do it all. So when you start early, especially with parenting, it's having it go, it's doing it together,
How you
right?
say that, because when even if you have a meeting and you're still sort of feeding each other information depending on what you're planning or what you need, you're still feeling like it's not all on you or just, one
Yes.
person. Even though in the beginning it might be you initiating a lot of the ideas or a lot of the planning, but at least you're talking about it together and you're dividing up responsibility is what it sounds like, which I think is huge. Like it's huge because you can just say, okay, so this person does this person is responsible for this. And if it doesn't work, we're going to adjust, we're going to fix it. But just like even having the discussion, being like, this is too much for me to do on my own. And these are the things we need to focus on in sharing
Right.
certain responsibilities. So,
Yeah. So then you're also coming up with priorities together because something that's a priority to your partner may not be yours and vice versa.
yeah.
But that's where negotiation and compromise comes in. So then it's talking about the expectation. What's the expectation for this child, for this weekend, for this week, for our lives? So you're on the same page. And it's making sure that when you're on the same page, you'll have less, not none, but less miscommunication about how you're parenting, how you're living, and what's going on in the
Yeah.
future.
And hopefully less resentment, right? That's definitely a huge part of it. I think it was a Holderness family app video where they were getting ready for holiday and the dad is outside like trimming trees and like
Yeah.
fixing the fence and cleaning out the attic. And then the mom's like,
Yep.
this is not what we need right now, right? So that's kind of the idea where it's like, those things are great and those things need to get done, but that's not the priority in that moment, right? So then just having a discussion. What do we need to focus on? What's the most important thing in the next week or two, even month, or even week, if that's all you can manage at that time? Just getting it out there and making sure that we have understanding and communication. I love that. I was just thinking that I have a lot of clients / friends who have partners who are incapable. I hate to say that, but like they have ADHD or they're basically like children themselves.
Also enabling. ADHD can be taught to do what they can do. They just might need a lot more alarms. They might need a reminder, but where the partner or the woman says, okay, I will remind you, but you still need to do it. So ADHD is not, and acting like a child is not an excuse.
Yes.
They can still learn. Just because they didn't learn it when they were a child doesn't mean they can't learn it now. It may be slower and it may be smaller steps, but they can still learn.
Do they have to take the responsibility as the partner though like the wife has, or the mom has to take the responsibility to support the partner with ADHD in that way? Like, is that sort of the only way it would work?
What do you mean support? Because then it would depend. If the partner's trying to remember but having a hell of a time remembering, even with all the alarms of taking little Johnny to soccer. If the mom, the woman says, "All right, I'm going to remind you at 12 that you need to take Johnny to soccer at 1." Okay, I'm willing to do that. That's support, but still knowing that dad needs to follow through
Who's setting
with
the
it.
alarms?
The dad.
Okay. But who's telling the dad to set the alarms?
His therapist or them together, they're coming up with a solution.
Okay. That's where my question is. Like, does it become even more like the one parent has another child where they have to like be on top of them 24/7 and be teaching them all these skills?
No, the dad needs to get into therapy and learn how to manage his ADHD. That's him taking responsibility on being a fully functional adult, even with ADHD.
Okay. But what if that doesn't happen?
Then the woman needs to come up with her expectations, and is she willing to live like that?
We're expecting all of the partners to be fully functioning adults. Some of them are not. So then what? Right? So then it's the expectation that we will meet together, we will compromise, we will communicate, but it's your responsibility to figure out the rest, essentially.
So it's, do you expect them to be a fully functioning adult? Yes, because that's what you wanted. But if they are not capable or not willing, then you need to either accept that and take on the role of mom for this person too. You can do that. Or say, I'm not doing that. That is not the partnership I want. And there's always more in the gray area of that and how much the woman is going to do or not do. But that's kind of like the two extremes. Like, I can accept you and you're going to be my third, fourth, fifth child because that's okay for me. Or no way in hell I'm going to leave, or somewhere along that spectrum.
Yeah.
But it's accepting what your partner is able to provide in the relationship.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And then I was thinking about the enabling piece. I can imagine it'd be very easy to have that situation occur where you're not consciously enabling, but you are.
Yes.
And then that makes it
Yes.
easier for the partner to step back and not have as much responsibility or not take as much responsibility in a sense.
Yes. Yes. And the woman's going to hit burnout and so much resentment very quickly.
And that would be something that might be a good like couples therapy kind of situation, maybe.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, with someone, with a therapist that has experience with ADHD couples.
Right. Okay. That's a really good point. I'm thinking about the couples I know with one with ADHD. Typically, the man is in my mind. It tends to be a really difficult situation for them to be willing to work on it. And also the couples therapy can feel like, again, the non-ADHD parent, like their responsibility, like they're taking it on as part of something they're doing for the relationship and not necessarily the other partner is taking that responsibility on themselves.
Yeah.
But my head just went to, people are going to say
Mm-hmm.
that, like, it's going to be like, what if my partner doesn't step up or doesn't want to or can't? But you're saying you can always.
You can always, yes, you can always, but it's the expectation. Like, how much is that partner taking their own life in their hands? Are they on medication? Are they in their own therapy? Are they doing some coaching? Are they learning executive functioning? Like, are they doing that to try to be a better partner, better father, better person? Or are they just like, I don't care, I don't want to, this relationship isn't worth it to me? Kind of. Then the woman has to be like, all right, fine, I'm just going to stay, I'm going to take care of the person. It's not going to last long. Or say, well, this is not what I want, and I'm going to.
What does it look like for, let's just go with, the gender norms. Let's say the mom is enabling the dad who has either ADHD or just struggles with responsibility in general. What would it look like?
It would look like mom doing everything, dad being drug along to things. I mean, I'm picturing a mom gathering up all the kids. They need to go to Johnny's baseball, getting all the kids, dad sitting on the couch, maybe on his phone because he needs to doom scroll for the dopamine. And then mom's got everybody ready. The car's packed. She's like, are you coming? He's like, oh, baseball's now? Okay, let's go. He's not taking any responsibility for that situation. right? But mom's not even asking him for help, probably because she's done.
Yeah.
And she's just getting everybody.
The other thing is like I've seen a little bit more of like the less extreme version that still seems like a little bit of enabling where it's like the parent, the dad is doing things, but it's really the things he enjoys. So it's let's say he really likes baseball and he really likes to take the kids to the park and he's doing those things. But then when it comes to all the other stuff that's hard,
Right.
and doesn't feel good and isn't as fun and is uncomfortable, like maybe planning a meal plan or even just making sure the kid has their uniform before they go and figuring out where it is and where to store it and how to organize it. That stuff is not happening. But some of the bigger stuff he's doing, so it looks sort of like he's contributing, and he is to an extent, but it's like all the little tiny details that lead up to those events are not happening as much and they're not his responsibility. And so I think it can definitely look really obvious where there's like nothing happening, but I feel like there's also a choosing of the types of tasks that they want to do that are a little bit less taxing on their brain or difficult for them.
Definitely. It really helps with couples therapy just because that third person can suggest to him, not the mom nagging, but suggesting to him, what will you take on? What will now be your responsibility? And how are you going to make sure you do it, even though you don't want to? Because that's being adult. So it's what are you willing to take on right now? And maybe if it's really hard, he starts with one thing. Maybe he's the one doing the dishes every night before dinner. So how is he going to make it more fun for him? Is he going to listen to a podcast? Is he going to listen to music? What is he going to do? Is he going to watch the game while he does the dishes? But he's doing the dishes.
So having to figure out what motivates you, even as an adult, is really important. This is actually a really good lead into talking about how we can raise boys to have more some of this responsibility when it comes to creating the family.
Yeah, and it's going to look different with a neurodivergent brain versus we'll say, neurotypical brain. So for
point.
a neurodivergent brain, it could be a little bit more work,
yes,
but they can still learn. They can. It's just going to look different.
I love that you said that because I think unconsciously for parents that have neurodivergent kids, it can be really easy to maybe not go in that direction because it's difficult. It's harder. So we have to know that that's normal for it to be harder. And for sure, it's possible. I think it is 100% possible. Right. And maybe we need more support. If that's
and there's support out there. There's so much support out there for parents of neurodivergent kids these days. I can think of 2 of them that provide so much support.
So we talked about already, not even neurodivergent versus neurotypical, but biologically, the boys are going to be born with these hormones that tend to help them focus on big picture, problem solving, survival, more independence, more task focused stuff, reduces the scanning of the environment, reduces attunement to social emotional cues. Because if you think about it, in the past, in primal society, it was basically survival. There was no benefit for men really to be paying attention to those social emotional cues because they didn't need to. And it would actually would like inhibit survival. Okay.
Yeah.
So it makes sense. But now that we're in a completely different time with a completely different culture, with completely different needs and expectations, we now have to take that nurture and help the nature along so that we're able to get to the point where we have boys and men that are supporting their partners and sharing some of the mental loads and co-creating family, which is one of the things that I read, I like that term a lot. And so when we talk about this idea of socialization, so from childhood, like you were saying, girls are rewarded for being helpful, nurturing, aware. Boys are rewarded for independence, competence. You did that. You completed that. Girls are trained to notice others' needs. We're always talking about, oh, look at her face. She looks so sad. We're talking about those things. And boys are trained to focus on their own goals. So my son's obsessed with science and he wants to create all these different things and he wants to make things out of wood and he wants to be physical and build stuff. And that's his goal. That's a very important goal for him. So women go into adulthood already having all of these caretaking muscles developed. They've been taught all of it already, and they feel like they're responsible for all of it, for all the caretaking, and there's guilt if they don't do it. And so then you have the default parent, which is what happens because this is just naturally, in quotes, where girls go. Moms carry the calendar, moms carry the emotional temperature of the room, they track the logistics, the birthdays, appointments, all of that. So they are the ones that have the mental load. And then men often help instead of owning, which I am obsessed with that word, owning. Doesn't that kind of say everything?
Yes, I can't stand when women say, "Oh, my husband, he's great, he's helping." No, no, he's not helping. He's not watching the kids. He's not babysitting the kids. We have to work on our language. That's why you like the owning. Men need to own. So if they need specific tasks to own, give them specific tasks. Maybe they're on diaper duty, but owning certain tasks that used to fall on your plate, give it to them.
And maybe even they decide what those tasks are.
They decide. Yes.
I love love it for them to decide that. And so again, we're not talking about all moms and all dads, right? This is individual. This is nuanced. So we do want to remember that. But right now we're just going off generalities because we have to, because it just makes it that much simpler. So there are very attuned, to emotions dads, like 100%. And there are moms that are not as attuned. And then there are emotionally present men, and then they're not as emotionally present women. And there's highly nurturing men, and then there's women that aren't nurturing. So we definitely want to put that out there that it's not black or white, like 100%. But we're just going to go on sort of the stereotype for now, just so that we can help everybody out there with some of these challenges a little more easily. So what we need to do now is intentionally build the muscle for the boys to grow into emotional attunement and nurturing. So when it comes to raising boys who become caretakers or become more emotionally attuned, we need to start with noticing. And so I'll give you a really fast tool that I use with my boys that is not emotional noticing, but it does help. So every night I say to my boys, can you please go notice 5 things in the house that need to be taken care of, cleaned up, or fixed, and do that. And as I did it, they would usually go to their stuff first, which actually I'm fine with too. But they would they would find a glass, they would find a plate, they would find a toy, they would find a coat, they would put it all away. Recently, though, my older son has been like, can I do somebody else's stuff? Well, does that count? Which I thought was so interesting that he said that, right? Because you know how kids are with fairness. I'm not cleaning that up. That's not mine. So that's not even a gender thing. That's just a kid. That's just a kid thing. So they already have that where they don't want to clean up after somebody else, right? Or take care of something for somebody else. So I love to do that at night. It's just a simple tool. Also, when it comes to naming emotions and noticing facial expressions, we're going to want to ask more questions of boys that are more focused on emotions and reading tone and reading facial expressions and reading body cues and naturally tuning into other people's emotions and facial cues, which I think, sometimes, again, some boys are great at it. Some boys need a little support. So some of the questions you can ask are, what do you think your sister's feeling right now? If maybe they hurt them or they took their toy, what do you think your sister's feeling right now? Like, look at her face. What is that? What is that emotion? And then maybe the parent gets upset. The dad or the mom raises their voice. Like, what do you notice about the tone of the voice? How does it make you feel when there's a voice that sounds like that? Maybe asking, how do you know when someone needs help? How do you know when someone needs you to support them or make sure that they're okay and check in on them? That sort of thing. So it builds their attunement muscle. And the other thing was making caretaking just part of the normal way of being and not special, like not praising them overly for helping someone or caretaking someone. It's just this idea like everyone does that. It's normal for all genders and all people to help each other. And there's no difference in those things. So then it becomes part of who they are and not something that they just randomly do because somebody's giving them praise for it. So then the other thing we talked about was the ownership piece. So we want to make sure that our boys have ownership, and that is called real responsibility, not just chores, not just tasks, but actually a full project is theirs to think about, anticipate, plan, worry about. So let's imagine that you have a pet. Maybe that's their job, is to literally think of every need that the pet has and anticipate it, plan for it, and make sure they have the tasks figured out, right? Maybe they're responsible for packing their own lunch, which is a lot of steps. If you think about it, you got to make sure you have everything you need for your lunch. You got to make sure that you've planned when you're going to make the lunch, got to plan what's in the lunch, got to make sure it's cold, got to make sure it's in the right place, planning meals, noticing when supplies are low. So like maybe there's no toilet paper in the bathroom. That's somebody's job, And so instead of helping, it becomes this is your job. This is your responsibility. It's not
Right.
helping. And I actually
Right.
really do enjoy having my kids, my boys, especially like Leah and I were talking about how sometimes it's easier or makes more sense to go to the girls for support and help. But I try to do a little more with the boys consciously, which is sometimes a little challenging. But if I can remember that the responsibility of setting the table could be my son, even though it may be a little more difficult, that's his responsibility. Or maybe his responsibility is making a meal every week, one meal, right? At 12, my son could do that. My 8-year-old can make eggs. So maybe that's his responsibility for breakfast. I'll be there. I'm standing there, but he's doing it, right? And the pride they have in some of these things is just insane, right? They get so excited.
Right. You're building confidence, and confidence makes them want to do more.
Yes, exactly.
Not less.
And it's easy in the house because there's so many things that have to get done. You can have the opportunities, to help them do these things. And I mean, I'm a parenting coach. I know it's not easy to get your kids to do even the littlest tasks. I totally get that. So my suggestion is to start really, really small and pick one small thing. But also Leah was talking about meeting with your partner. You can also meet with your kids in the same way and discuss, hey, what do you want to take on as your responsibility? Let's choose. Because then if you have a choice, easier to get it done. Yes. So we definitely do have that in my house. And sometimes we have to adjust it. Like the recycling needs to be taken out and the same person does it over and over and they're sick of it. Let's switch it up. Let's have the next person do it. But just having that regular responsibility, like my daughter's responsibility is to clean out the dishwasher every morning. We don't do it. Even on the weekends, we don't do it. It's her responsibility. Or my son's responsibility is to take out the trash. It's the end. His responsibility. And again, this is building up from smaller responsibilities. It's not something that we go to immediately when they're 6. We do it when they're much older and more responsible, but it's coming up from all the other little tasks that they do, putting their clothes in the hamper. Noticing the clothes is the first thing.
Yes.
Going in the room and seeing all the things on the floor and noticing which ones are which and where they go is the first step. So this is what I'm trying to say. We don't necessarily have to go all the way to doing the task. Just noticing that they're there and being like, oh, okay, like if you could just pick something up off the floor, can you just do that? Pick one thing, pick it up off the floor, put it where it needs to go.
Right.
Oh, wait, where does it need to go? Exactly. That's what we need to figure out.
Right? Because once they notice, then they can plan. If they notice their clothes all over the floor, they might go, my gosh, I don't have pants for the rest of the week. Even if they're not doing their own laundry yet, they can still put their clothes in the hamper, give it to you and say, can you please do my laundry? I need pants. You're like, okay, great. I didn't have to go in and grab all of it, notice it. They already took that first step. And then when they get older, you can teach them to do the laundry, but it's that planning. I need pants. I don't have any. I need the laundry. So they're taking those steps and then they're going to hopefully remember that each week.
And it's something that I feel is so good for, like, that's completely taking it off your plate as opposed to you just doing all of the laundry, folding it and putting it in their drawers and it just magically appears in their drawers, which is great. If that's something you want to choose to do, great. But if for some reason that's not something you want to do anymore, it might be a good idea to like help them start noticing, even like you were saying, the first couple steps of that chore so that you don't even have to initiate, hey, clothes need to be washed because I'm out of them. That's huge mental load off of you. Even if it's just them putting it in the laundry room. Seriously, that's huge. So I do think that as they get older, you can add. When they're younger, take it really, really slow. But even little kids can notice 2 things on the floor they need to pick up and not say this goes here, this goes here, or this goes here, and just help them to figure out like how to take responsibility for that. And if there's no place to put it, that's also good learning. How do we figure out where to put it? How do we organize it? And then we also wanted to make sure that they're remembering their own activities. They're remembering their own deadlines for homework. Or maybe even, what do we need to pack when we go away for a trip? Making a list. We have 7 days. How many of different things do you need? And having them write down a list. Or what do you think you might want to prepare for when you have soccer practice? Where is your soccer clothes and what's in it that you need? Well, I need shin guards, I need cleats, I need my uniform. Okay, where are those things? And just helping them to start organizing where those things are or having a system. And then the other thing was the modeling was a big piece of it. Like having the man in the household model doing all of these things is huge, right? So if your husband's comforting, apologizing, cooking, cleaning, caregiving, staying home with sick kids, tending to kids that are upset, all of these things can be very, very helpful to have a have a role model that shows you how to do this. And then it's okay. And it's totally normal. And it's part of being a human and caring for people.
Right. And having multiple men, or if there is no man in the house or not available, it's an uncle, an older brother, a grandfather, it's some male figure, a
Yes.
teacher, a coach, anyone that's able to show them, because as we're learning, it really does take that village,
Mm-hmm.
and we need to curate and cultivate our village so it can include other people than just the people living inside the house.
Which is one of the reasons why our mental load is so high on both sides of the genders. Like, the dads have very high mental load and existential loads, right? And the moms have the mental and emotional loads, but it's because we only have two people in our nuclear family that are taking care of everything. So we do want to put that out there, that we weren't necessarily culturally and societally expected to raise kids on our own. And so I think that is another big piece of the puzzle that we don't need to talk about a ton today, but just remembering that, like, right now, cultivating community and support and even extended family is really difficult, but can be super important if it's possible for you. So anything that you can do to get someone to have lean on if you need extra role models or you need any sort of help with anything. And there's a lot of single parent households out there. That's a whole other story, right? How does that look and how are we going to get support in those areas? So it's not black and white. It's definitely nuanced, and we realize that, and we're just kind of going off the, traditional relationship, but I don't think we're meant to do this alone. And I think that's why the sharing of the family load and the emotional and mental load has to be on both partners. And so I think that's kind of just what we've come to in this culture as to now. It might not be perfect and it might not be exactly what we need 100%, but I think it's a good start. A couple more things about boys. We want to make sure that we allow them to show crying and any sort of emotional situation they're in, with their fear, sadness, all those things need to be accepted. And we don't want to rush them to feel better necessarily. We want them to feel emotionally safe, and that it's okay to have all these feelings as a man, or as a boy. So we want to have them be empathetic and get upset when their stuffy is hurt or ripped, or get upset when the fish is looking a little sick. That's all good. We need to encourage that. And I think sometimes that can be really, really hard because our culture tells us it's not okay.
Right.
And so the goal is not necessarily to raise boys who help women, but to raise men who co-create family life. So they see what needs to be done. They feel responsible for others' well-being. They're emotionally present, and they're competent and confident caregivers, which is what we were talking about earlier, Leah, about I know how to do all this stuff because I did it growing up. I'm confident in knowing how to make some eggs. I'm confident in knowing how to do my laundry. If you raise a boy that knows how to do that, you have a man that can also feel confident that they can take the leading role and own those things because they've done them before. And if they need to learn, again, totally possible. Yes. So I think that that's probably a good start when it comes to helping us raise boys that are going to take on some mental load as they get older.
There are ways that we can create change in our own lives with our own mental load, and how we can start sharing that, and how we can change our expectations that our partners or other people in our lives can take on what we are also taking on, and being able to share it will help us have a more balanced life and a more fulfilling life in that way.
Yes, and not only sharing it with your partner, but also sharing it with your children, I think is important to remember. I love that. I'm so glad that you guys all came today to listen to this. We'd love to have any feedback that you want to give us. Please message us on Instagram. We're always available, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Yes, thank you.